I'm with Jared Klickstein, everybody. Welcome to Walk-Ins. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for coming through and talking. And your book is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
I've read a lot of books for this podcast, and yours is actually riveting. You're a great writer, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
And your story is it's not you know what's interesting? I was talking to my husband about this because he and I met in recovery, and he was like, do you think people tend to embellish in books like this, or do you think that they tend, what's your general feeling? And I was like, I don't know. As someone who grew up not in anywhere near the level of dysfunction as you, but so many things I could relate to, like protecting your family, having people around you, being like, well, there's not much I can do, even though I know something isn't right. You seem to like, I was like, I feel like there's a lot in between the lines that just like doesn't get said, actually. Was it hard for you to write?
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, like this story just happened to me. So like, I appreciate the kind words about me being a good writer. I didn't write this story. I mean, a lot of people have to create amazing stories. This just happened. So it was pretty easy.
Yeah, but you're still a good writer.
Well, thank you.
You can have an amazing story and not be a good writer.
That's true.
So you still are good at telling your story.
Yeah.
There is still some skill involved in that.
Yeah. And listen, I wanted to protect my family, and my dad recently passed, but he was alive for the majority of the portion of me writing the book and publishing it. And he gave his full support. He said, write whatever you want. I don't care. Wow. I mean, he was a good man. My parents are good people.
Yeah.
I didn't want to throw my family my extended family under the bus, and I didn't have to because they didn't do anything terrible.
Yeah.
They actually saved my life.
Yeah.
And just tried to put everyone, I mean, people have reached out and not been happy with what I wrote. Yeah.
Can you give our listeners just a kind of brief overview of your book, Crooked Smile, what it's about, and the story we're referencing?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sober 6 years, and during that time, I've written a book, and it's about my entire life. And it's not just about me being an addict and ending up homeless on Skid Row. It's a lot of it is about my childhood, because both my parents were actually heroin addicts and crackheads. And so that was like a whole interesting portion of the book. And then it's about me sort of finding my way to follow in the footsteps of my parents, unfortunately. And then I end up on Skid Row and chronically homeless for like 10 years and addicted to heroin. But it's very funny, and I try to incorporate a lot of humor, and also I try to sort of critique the policies that hurt me during those 10 years and then uplift the policies that I think helped me, that there weren't a lot. And then I offer like my suggestions on how we move out of this and how we can create new policies that would help a lot more people. And it just, I break down what we're doing wrong in addressing these epidemics.
Yeah, Michael Schellenberger, who's been on this podcast, he and I actually went down to Skid Row together, and that was such a weird day. It was a very, very strange day, but we went because it's a long story, but we started in Skid Row, and we were walking around handing out water, and I was someone who had lived in LA for 17 years, and the expansion of Skid Row is insane. It's massive now.
Yeah.
It was not that big when I first moved to LA. It was a couple of blocks, maybe. And now, how big is it?
It's probably 10 by 10 blocks, but the real issue is that it's like sort of spread out into like all parts of LA.
Yeah.
Like there's little satellite states everywhere. I mean, in the Valley, in West LA, Venice.
Yeah.
I was homeless there starting in 2011, and things were dramatically different than they were the second time I was homeless there in like 2015. And then from 2015 to now, it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
So it's really progressed.
Was the fentanyl around when you were, because I have this joke that I do actually about how, and your book reminded me of this joke so many times and Schellenberger and I talked to so many people where I'm like, you could do drugs for decades and hardly anyone died. And it was talking to like young people about what life was like before fentanyl. Yeah. It's you could be a junkie for like decades.
Oh,
kind of a functioning junkie for a long time. I don't know that the lifespan of a junkie is that long anymore.
No, no. I mean, my dad used heroin on and off from the age of like 12 to 50, to 58.
Yeah.
And yeah,
That's
he
not a
ruined his
thing
life,
anymore.
but he kept his life. I
Right.
mean, so like, yeah, the lifespan of a junkie is, I don't know what it is. It's got to be 2 or 3 years
I
on
think that's what
average. I
it
mean,
is, yeah.
so these people are getting strung out on fentanyl, like on fake Oxycontin, like when they're like 18, 19, they're ending up homeless. And a lot of the policies are like, well, let's just let them do their thing. And then when they're ready, we'll be here for them. And first of all, they're not there for them. There's no like treatment options really. There's no detox options. And second of all, your lifespan isn't that long.
Right.
It's not like we'll meet you when you're ready. Like you're just gonna die,
Right.
But yeah, when I was out there, there was no fentanyl. Fentanyl really came on the scene about 2018, 2019, and then it really exploded with COVID and the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But that's a conspiracy.
Oh, interesting. Wait, what's the conspiracy?
Well, heroin requires raw plant material to
Yes.
create, and that means that a lot of this raw plant material is created in places like Afghanistan,
Yes.
and as we see with the onset of the Afghanistan war, the potency of heroin increases dramatically. 2006, 2007, 2008, we have a heroin epidemic, post OxyContin epidemic, and this requires a lot of coordination between the Mexican cartels and the Afghani government and probably the military and maybe the U.S. government. I don't really want to go there, but fentanyl requires no raw plant material.
Right.
You don't need Afghanistan. That equation, that's out of the equation at this
Right.
point. So it's fully synthetic, and so it could just be a coincidence that I don't know, but
Because there is this idea that the US military went in and kind of helped the locals guard these heroin, the like fields or whatever.
yeah.
And when they got out, the Taliban took them over or doesn't allow them to grow anymore.
Well, initially, when the Taliban first took power prior to the Afghanistan war, they were against heroin and well, they were against poppy cultivation,
Right.
and that was kind of a dark time for a heroin addict in America. Like heroin got really low quality. I mean, when I first started doing heroin, it was like $30 a gram, and you had to do a whole gram.
Yeah.
And then I remember the day that my drug dealer said, "Well, grams now are $100, but it's 20 times more potent than what I had before. So you're going to be okay. You just need like a little piece, and you're going to get really high."
Uh-huh.
And that was probably like 2009.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
When was I using heroin? It was 97.
Okay.
No, 98. 98.
Okay.
And it was black tar, and I didn't shoot. I chased the dragon,
Yeah.
which when I was reading that, I was like, it's like I couldn't look at tinfoil for like a good solid 3 years.
Yeah, it's tough. Every time I see like Reynolds Wrap or something,
Yeah.
it does remind me that more than a needle, like the high from smoking it is actually faster than shooting yourself up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like an instantaneous hit, and it's like crack, like
Yeah.
crack and cocaine are the same thing, but you just ingest it entirely differently, and it's hits you so differently.
Isn't it funny how there's like junkie pride?
Oh, yeah.
Even within the like you'll be rock bottom and a complete loser. And in the rehab I was in, it was like, oh, well, you're not a real heroin addict because you didn't. There's like the levels of like junkiness. You're like, oh, you were just a heroin addict. You didn't do speedballs, you fucking
Yeah.
pussy.
Oh, there's wars. There's full on wars going on between like tweakers and junkies, and like who's better, and then when you go to jail, most people are like the Nazis are all tweakers, so they like they have they don't put up with any sort of like I'm dope sick. Like they don't like that at all.
Yeah.
And they'll sort of make fun of you and bully you to some extent, I guess. I don't
How long were you in jail?
6 months.
Okay.
2015 to 2016.
And were you in like LA County? Where were you?
Yeah, I was in Twin Towers in LA County.
Okay, yeah.
And it was I had a great time. It really I think it was a big factor in me turning my life around, which people don't like to hear. People don't like that, but I had a good time and I got off heroin.
But you could have done drugs in jail, no?
There's drugs, but they're incredibly expensive, and they're really reserved for like the shot callers and like who they want to hand them out to. And But yeah, I mean, if your family's willing to wire money to someone's family in jail, like $200, you can get high once.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have the money.
Yeah.
So
So you got
yeah.
sober.
Yeah, I mean, I relapsed probably like 3 or 4 times after jail, like 3 or 4 days
Oh yeah.
in total. And had like incredibly terrible results from
Mhm.
that. But yeah, jail, like sort of, I've never been dope sick since jail. And but it didn't cure me, but I never got strung out again.
Yeah, I think I can relate to just like the way you describe heroin too, as like that oblivion, you know, just that was what I found so appealing, but I did chase that first high for the rest of my life.
Oh yeah.
It was never ever the same.
No, and it grows pretty boring actually. Heroin is a relatively boring drug. I mean, you can see them out there, you know, they're
Yeah,
just
did you see Ari Shaffir's new special?
No, I'm gonna watch
Oh
it.
my
Yeah.
God. I watched it last night when I got home like 2 in the morning, and I was thinking about you and talking to you, but he talks about the difference between like tweakers and heroin
Oh,
addicts.
really?
And it's so funny. Just how they're like all folded over, and it just seems like, but it is everywhere in America right now.
Yeah.
It in every major city. It's what do you think? Why do you think there's been this explosion? Is it just these like tolerant programs of, you know, let's let the junkies just be junkies and harm reduction or whatever? You know, what do you attribute this to?
That's definitely a big factor. I think the Oxycontin epidemic, you know, naturally leads into this. Like a bunch of people, mostly in rural areas, get addicted to Oxycontin, like in the 2000s. That leads to the first heroin boom or the heroin epidemic of this century, you know, around 2010. And then that cut. So we have this big explosion of heroin addicts. And I mean, I can go into depth about this. Okay, so
Go into it.
Okay, so 2011, I graduated college. That's the biggest graduating class in American history up until that point. We get out. The economy is terrible. It's shit.
Yeah.
There's no jobs. So now you have like millions of people with college degrees that aren't like liberal arts college degrees, me included. I got a history. I mean, I got a degree in history.
That line made me laugh out loud
Yeah.
in your book.
Yeah.
Where you're like, I got a degree in history and then pursued, what's the exact line? And then pursued a study in being homeless or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, I wrote next to it, LOL. It made me laugh. I'm like, that's, I think a lot of people, like you're saying.
Yeah. My whole generation.
You're like, my whole generation is homeless.
So we come out, and then this is like Occupy Wall Street's brewing, and people
Yeah.
are understandably upset about what's going on with you know, the wealth inequality and disparity and the state of the economy and like the selling out of the middle class. So you have like a whole generation of people that are leaning towards socialism and leaning towards leftist policy or leftist politics, and then at the same time you get some of the most progressive laws passed, like in places like California, like SB 1380, Prop 47. You know, it's like criminal justice reform, homeless reform, addiction reform, and the nonprofit sphere explodes. And then there's all these jobs, and it becomes like a jobs program for like loser millennials, basically, who already like have these sort of like
useless degrees,
almost like and like extreme progressive views on this whole situation. So that coupled with like this coming off the tail end of the Oxycontin epidemic. So you have all these like drug addicts, and you have all these people that are basically the government has outsourced to them to handle it, and their solutions are wacky.
And they're also drug addicts.
They're drug addicts in their own way. Like
Yeah.
they're into doing ketamine and Molly and stuff, and you know.
And I think also just, I mean, no one really wants to have a conversation about how the American life has gone off the rails since weed has become more and more legal everywhere.
Certainly, yeah.
I see just like you know, everyone's like, why is society collapsing?
Yeah.
But people are like, oh, it's weed, man. And they think of it like the 70s weed. But I worked in that industry. I'm like, this is not the same kind of weed. It's aggressive.
Oh,
You go to these farms like up in Humboldt and shit, and they've got RVs, they've got guns, they're fighting cartels that are moving in. I'm like, you guys have no idea what this industry looks like and what the weed is, how strong the weed actually is now,
Yeah.
and how powerful they've made it over the years. These guys are also geniuses. They're cloning. They're like, it was wild, man. Nobody really understands, like, I feel like they still think of it like, "Oh, it's just this, like, harmless weed that our parents, the wacky tobacco," and I'm not
Yeah.
like, make everything illegal or whatever, but I do think people kind of underestimate how strong, because it gives a lot of people anxiety. It puts people into, like, young men in particular into, like, psychosis. It's
Yeah.
not the same.
No, no, I've witnessed people, like, ruin their lives
Yeah.
with weed, and I never thought I'd be a guy that would say that,
Yeah. Junkie
10 years
pride.
ago, but, yeah, no, weed is incredibly powerful now, and unfortunately, it's not as cool. Like, my little cousins that are, like, 19, 20, like, they don't smoke weed. They think it's lame because their parents smoke weed, and
Yeah.
they just see how, like, whacked out they get, and it's just, as it was legalized, it became, first of all, what became less cool, and second of all, like the technology just like, exponentially grew, and this stuff is incredibly powerful.
So you have all these, like, high Molly ketamine taking millennials with useless degrees who are now in charge of all of the junkies from the oxy
Yeah.
epidemic.
Yeah. And then, so their opinion is that people, because of unfettered capitalism, end up homeless. And as a result of becoming homeless, they end up on fentanyl. And
Okay.
and I don't think that. I think it's actually the opposite. I think people get addicted to drugs and then end up becoming homeless more so than that situation.
Right.
Because I've been homeless. So they,
Right.
they don't like me. I mean, these are my friends. I mean, these are people I went to college with, and they're starting to believe me a little bit, but I was out there and I met all these people. I met thousands of people that were homeless, and these people, most of these people were either addicted to drugs and then became homeless, or they were mentally ill,
Yeah.
and that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
That's what it seems to be, or the drugs send you into a state of kind of mental illness.
yeah, either you're like naturally mentally ill, or the drugs have sent you into a situation where now you're either temporarily mentally ill under the drugs, or in some cases permanently. And people are running to drugs because life has changed a lot in the last 20 years.
Mhm.
The opportunities that people have, in some ways they've grown it immensely, and then in other ways, just having like a normal middle class life is sort of like that opportunity has evaporated for a lot of people, and yeah,
Mhm.
people are running to drugs.
Do you think that that's just kind of a cop out though?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. I mean, as we know with like the discourse going on Twitter right now, there's a lot of stuff about like, the Zoomers have it worse than, the millennials, and the millennials have it worse than the boomers. We can,
Gen X always gets left
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Once
yeah,
again,
yeah.
skipped over.
No, listen, we're in America. We're in the greatest country in the world in terms of opportunity. You have a shot here. My parents were junkies. My dad made $51 an hour as a carpenter in
Mm.
1997 and bought a house as a junkie, bought a house for like 80 grand. That house is worth $2 million now. He sold it for heroin money before I could inherit it. So I didn't, so yeah, some things have changed, but at the same time, I'd argue that my dad had an artificially inflated life. He told me when that happened, he said, I shouldn't be making $51 an hour as a carpenter, but he was in a
Why?
union. Because he saw that, okay, because he got like an $11 raise one time.
Uh-huh.
Like the union was like all mobbed up, and like I don't know. So he went up $11, and he was like, this can't last. Like you can't pay like hundreds of idiots, a lot, not idiots, but like a lot. He's like, there's guys that just tell good jokes, and that's why they're in the union. They're not actually good carpenters, and like they're making 51 an hour now. He said, this is going to affect the economy. And like, what do you know? Like, he was a cabinet maker. He was a finished carpenter. And first of all, now new construction has barely any finished carpentry. And second of all, cabinets are made by IKEA now,
Yeah.
so like so now there's just a lot less work, because of the inflated wage was what he told me as like a uneducated heroin addict in the 90s. Who knows if he's correct?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Are you dealing with an HMO like I am? It's such a pain in the butt. If I want to get any sort of testing done to ensure I'm making my health a priority, I have to wait weeks for an appointment to see my doctor, then get a referral from her, and wait weeks more for an appointment with the specialist I needed to see just to get some lab work. Quest simplifies this process. I can purchase my own lab tests online and test for a multitude of health issues I might be concerned about, then take those results to my doctor better armed with the information I need. At questhealth.com, you can get hundreds of tests across several different categories, from allergies to heart health, hormones, sexual health, women's health tests for egg quantity, perimenopause, menopause, men's health tests for testosterone, prostate, and so much more. These are lab quality tests, the same ones you'd be given at your doctor's office, so prioritize your health and visit questhealth.com today. Use the code WALK-INS to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use the code WALK-INS for 25% off.
You've escaped a lot of things in your life. How did you escape the Boston accent?
My parents had really thick Boston accents. My mom had a thicker accent than my dad, which, is nothing to be proud about. I had it, but then again, I grew up with pay-per-view. I grew up with a black box, so I had illegal cable, and I watched every movie that came out over and over and over again. So I probably learned a lot of my speaking ability from movies. And then, but I did have one, and then I got adopted by my aunt and uncle in Oakland, California when I was 12, and people made fun of me. And I trained myself to
see, bullying works.
Yeah, bullying worked. Well, they were, it wasn't like brutal or anything, but they were like, what the fuck are you saying?
Yeah.
So I taught myself how to talk differently. And I wish I retained a little bit of it because it gives you sort of like a street cred,
in jail,
situation.
or just in general.
Just in life.
It's funny. My husband had never really heard it, and we were going to visit my family because my family's from Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And we were in the Boston airport, and this woman was just loudly talking, and she was like, nah, nah, in the Boston accent. My husband was like, if you sounded like that, we would not be married.
No, it's one of the least attractive things a woman can have is a Boston accent, or a Philly accent might contend. That's my favorite accent, is Philly accent.
I was like, don't you think love would overcome it? He's like, I could never love that.
No, it's the least feminine sounding accent of all time. That's just how it is. But I'm probably lucky that I escaped that.
Yeah, of all the things you escaped.
Yeah, that puts you in a box.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can get like an office job with a Boston accent, unless you're in Boston.
It is funny your recollections of that, just talking about Boston and how like racist everybody is, even white people amongst other white people. I'm like, people don't understand. They're like, oh, that town's so racist. I'm like, they're racist against everyone. Like, no one's really got the upper hand in Boston.
No, it's amazing. I mean, because in people, like, there's Portuguese people there. Like, people don't understand that. Like, people have never met a Portuguese person.
Yeah.
They're there and everyone hates them. And the white people, like the Italians don't consider the Portuguese white and the Irish don't consider the Italian white.
Yep.
And then everyone hates the Russians, even though the Russians are literally whiter than anybody.
Yep.
Literally, like their
It's
skin.
very similar in Rhode Island too.
Yeah.
A lot of
Rhode
same
Island has
dynamics.
a ton of Portuguese people. So I'd never met
And
a
a lot of
Mexican person.
Russians.
In my life, I'd never met a Mexican person until I moved to California.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of trajectory, East Coast, and then went to the Midwest, and then had an aunt who saved my life, and they didn't adopt me. They probably should have, and went out to California, and then ended up like living there, and so I think that's how I avoided it. Sometimes still used to come out when I would drink like that, because I quit. I did that thing of like quitting heroin and then going, oh, well, heroin was the problem.
Yeah.
And then continued to have another run for a long time doing I was like, as long as I don't do heroin, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And it ended up, so I hit like many rock bottoms until I finally got sober from everything at 35.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the last time I was dope sick was probably when I was 19, 20.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really common trajectory for a lot of people.
Mhm.
It's almost better when your life gets like so completely destroyed by heroin and you're like, I have to just quit everything. And then you just kind of quit young. Yeah, because
Yeah.
my dad tried that forever. He got off heroin when he was like, mostly for the most part, like by 50. And then he drank for like 8 years and then just would eventually do heroin every year or something like that and smoke crack and all that. But yeah, no, I'm grateful that, I mean, I tried that experiment many times. Like, I'm
How
just going to
old were
drink.
you when you got sober 6 years ago? How old are you?
29.
29. Okay,
Yeah.
young.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm 35 now. Yeah. So 29. I tried for the first time when I was 22. And every time it was like, okay, I just need to figure out how to get off heroin so I
Yeah.
can like smoke meth
Yeah,
like responsibly.
exactly.
And then it was like, okay, I can't really do meth.
Without heroin.
Yeah. So like I got to figure out how I can only do heroin every 3 days and then just drink every other day. And then eventually it's like, I just need to figure out how to drink. And then that doesn't
Yeah.
work. Because when I drink, I want to, shoot cocaine.
Yeah.
It just
I think
happens every
it's-
time.
I think it's, for me, it wasn't shooting cocaine, but it was snorting it. Like people are
Yeah.
like, why don't you drink anymore? I'm like, because I know I'll take a drink. I'll go, then that weed will sound really good. Then I'll be doing lines on a public toilet in a bar somewhere in Venice, like
Yeah.
immediately that night.
Yeah.
I know
Or
it.
it could take a year. But
No,
it will happen.
It will happen.
It'll probably happen immediately. But
Yeah.
even if it does, it's like a blessing if it happens immediately.
Yeah.
Because I've known people where it didn't happen immediately and they basically just wasted 2 years of their life.
Yeah. I mean,
know?
that was one of the things I had to kind of, I think getting sober is so hard because it's actually a miracle that anybody gets sober because you take away all of your coping mechanisms. What is that they say? It's like driving down the freeway 100 miles an hour and then you slam on the brakes and like everything that you've been throwing in the back of your car just comes flying forward.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have been throwing all your garbage in the back, your whole life history, all the trauma you've been avoiding. I started drinking very young and smoking weed like you. And something I really identified with that I don't actually hear many people say is that I too also think that I probably would have killed myself in high school had it not been for the fuzzy distance that weed and drinking provided for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
I don't think I could have I don't think my mind was kind of able to grapple with what was happening.
Yeah.
And so and it gave me the opportunity to kind of like just be out of the house and out partying and whatever and like using it to manipulate your parents. I really identified with.
Yeah. No, I
And-
totally agree. Yeah. Because, I was raised in a crack house and then I got adopted in Oakland into like a upper middle class area. And, these people, I didn't know what like a shower was or like what deodorant was. And alcohol, like, made them accept me because they like to drink and I knew how to drink and I immediately like got it saved my life in high school because of that. And also just I would have probably just ended up killing myself out of the shame of being like the offspring of a crack house.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then so yeah, it totally saved my life until it, destroyed my life.
Yeah, and that's what I think you use it as like a tool. And then I had so much regret that I didn't stay sober after my first time. Well, the only time really that I was in rehab. And then I stayed in a halfway house and then got out and I was young. I was like 20 years old. And like, I'm not going to quit drinking before I'm 21. That's absurd.
Yeah.
That just seems extreme. And I ended up, I look back like at all those years in between, and you and I should not be alive. You just shouldn't.
No, not
Even
not at
in my
all.
run of not doing heroin, but everything else, there was so much recklessness and bad behavior and shame and stuff that I accumulated and choices that I made and like very near death experiences in that time that it is that like there, but for the grace of God go I. I could be dead and I probably should have been homeless or burned it all down or there's a million ways that it could have rolled and somehow I managed to live. But then you do live and then you're trying to get sober and people, it's like you have no coping skills. You've taken away the only thing that helps you cope. and now you have all this wreckage that you've created in your life, plus whatever history that got you there, and you're supposed to just sit in sober and be sober.
Yeah.
And like, no, you probably don't have a job, you know, maybe you don't have a house, you don't. How did you do it?
Yeah, well, it definitely gets harder as you get older. Like I first went in when I was 22 and was like too young and dumb to really get it. But had I done it, I don't know where I'd be right now. You know, I'd probably be in a better place. I probably wouldn't have a criminal record. I probably wouldn't have a bunch of the traumatic experiences that I went through in my 20s. I probably would have saved a few relationships, you know, things like that. So yeah, by the time, you know, you get a little bit older, like when I'm 29, like I have nothing, you know,
Yeah.
I have no resume. I dropped out of college. No family will talk to me. Like literally I didn't talk to my aunt and uncle that adopted me it took me like 14 or 15 years just to get like an email, you know? So, the way I did it, I just got really lucky. I had these friends that went to this like long-term nonprofit rehab, and it was like the bottom of the barrel. And, it's odd because those ones work usually a lot better than the fancy ones, you know? So I was like
That's where I
really
went.
lucky that I didn't have health insurance and like wound up at one of those. And I like developed this whole community of like hundreds of people that like had been homeless. Like I could actually talk to people that were on Skid Row and then got off. And that gave me like this belief that it was possible. When you
Wow.
go to those fancy rehabs, you know, you're probably not going to run into someone that was on Skid Row.
Yeah.
And
You might have run into Matthew Perry, but
yeah, exactly. So they let me get a job. They helped me like form a resume and like get work boots and like
yeah.
tools. And they like got me out there. And not only that, like once I got the job, I could stay there
Yeah.
and like collect a check. And then that set me up for like a foundation. You know, I had like $3 or $4 grand.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I have enough money. I bought a car. I bought a car for like $1,200. I got a room at a sober living for like $600. It just gave me that little jump off point, you know, that they like walked me through this 4 to 6 months. They like held my hand
Yeah.
back into society. And we just need a lot more of that. There's not a lot of that going on.
That's weird. You know, I was in Minnesota when I got sober, and the guy I also really appreciated what you were saying about like junkie love, because man, that is a very specific thing. And the guy I went to a fancy place. I got 1 week of rehab on my insurance, and then they're like, okay, it's up, you can go home now. I was like, I can't fucking go home. I'll be doing drugs again.
Yeah.
And so I put myself on general assistance, and then called around, and I had some bad experiences with men in that week of rehab. And so I was looking for a place that was like just specifically female, not that would it was better than just all men, but there's
Yeah.
still like lesbians and flirting and all that stuff. Not the same though. And I called around, and there was like a state funded, I remember this woman answered, and she's like, you ever heard of boot camp? Because I was like, what's it like? And I knew that was somewhat what I needed. And it was like 40 women. Basically, everyone was avoiding jail. It was like their last chance. You know, it was kind of one of those like very, very rough people who'd been in and out of the system. And that shit saved me. Those women, I haven't done heroin ever since. I didn't stay sober forever, but they really taught me like how to be. I stayed there for like 7 months. I ended up just living there, and then I got a bike, and I would ride my bike to my job at a coffee shop. It's like you do start to just like build your life. But I don't know. There's so many things that I think about now, because that was in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've talked about this before, and I think about this a lot, like how, and I see it even in 12-step now, like this, I hate this term, but like, for lack of a better word, the kind of wokeness creeping into everything.
Yeah.
In the past decade. So I see it in the rooms. There was over Zoom during the pandemic, this woman logged in and was speaking and was giving everybody a lecture about their white privilege. I was like, no fucking dude like you needs to hear that at like rock bottom. That this shit has no place in here whatsoever. and changing like the preamble to like person,
Yeah.
just things like that. I wonder if all of that critical race theory had that kind of crept into rehabs had I been able to get better in the way that I could, because I was very conscious of the fact that I was like the only white girl. I was pretty much, I felt very spoiled and like privileged, not to use the word that's been overused, but I was aware that I had a lot more.
Yeah.
And then I felt like I couldn't talk, and I would say this to my counselors, and they're like, that you're all equal, just speak, tell your story. And I've said this before, like when I tell my story, that I'll be like, white people are fucked up. like I thought that I was so, like they'd be like, damn, that's fucked up. And these are people who had fucking horrific stories. And it made me, but I don't know if that would be the same now or what they're teaching in these rehabs. And I certainly, what is your experience of, you're kind of a little bit closer to it than me in terms of rehabs, and what's your sense of that?
It has crept in, and I noticed it in AA and or 12 step. And, I've gone to cities where like I want to go to a meeting, and like I look at the meeting schedule and it's like BIPOC, HIV positive meeting, or like LGBTQ. And it's like, there's no meeting. I can't go to a meeting because there is no like white guy meeting. Of course there are, but like, this is just like,
don't go to that one.
Yeah. Well, you keep making all these other meetings. That might be the only one left, but, so yeah, it's crept in, and specifically it's crept into like the ideology of addressing homelessness and addiction. Like post 2020, like everyone's a marginalized community, and like homeless people and like shoplifting meth heads have become a marginalized community. And like, so this has crept into the whole world of recovery. And it's like, well, hold on, these people are victims of like capitalism, and, maybe like a relapse isn't so bad. Maybe they're just like have a traumatic experience. And that kind of stuff is like, that's not going to get us past the problem of like, this person is on meth and we have to get them off meth. Like, so like excusing why they do meth is like not part of the solution. It's almost like the fires in LA. It's like, I get like, jumping on Gavin's back and everything, but it's like, and it goes for him too, because he's doing like constant, like defending his future career aspirations of president. And it's like, bro, there's a fire going on.
Yeah.
Like, but it goes for the other side. Like, hey, get off his back for a second. Like, let's get the fire out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the same thing with yeah, it's like, I went to a rehab where like you weren't allowed to talk to the women, the women, the men had to be with the men, the women had to be with the women. That was in 2018. Now no one knows what a woman is. So like that rule's over. Like you can talk to, because you can't, you know what I mean? Like, so that's like a new thing.
Oh God, that's horrific. And there are so many studies that show same-sex treatments, therapies, etc., are so much more effective than when you mix the sexes. For women and men, and women in particular have much better outcomes when it's just women. Yeah,
you see it in the rehabs. And like, I went to that place a few times. I relapsed a couple times, and I got a girlfriend one time, and it's not good because, and then all the men, if there's women in the room when you're like vulnerable in early sobriety and you're a man, you're only thinking about like getting the approval of that woman. Right. And it's not fair to the woman, to be like doing this. And then, so you're not really yourself. And then at the same time, you're like coming off of heroin and you're probably horny.
Yeah.
You're like, people get really, they need to grab onto something, and like sex is there, and men like are predatory and take advantage of these women. And it's real. Listen, I commend any woman that gets sober. There is always a man out there there's some man out there that will take you in. Yeah. You can keep getting high or drinking or all that. If everything crumbles, there is a man that will catch you, you know, and it's those quality of men, it drops over the years, but like, it's hard, no one was there to catch me. Yeah. No one was, except in San Francisco, there was a lot of opportunities to get caught by men that wanted me. But when I was homeless,
saying there's always like a man that will help you get sober when you're a woman?
No, there's like a man that will swoop in and be like, basically like, you're my girlfriend now. Right. But it's sort of I control you.
I saw this so much in LA. Like when I got a little bit more sober and I had sponsees, I would go to these big meetings and I would be like yelling him. I would be like, leave her. She has 30 days. Go away, bro. What are you doing? But they're just predators. And these are men with like long-term sobriety. Some of them had decades.
Yeah, it's very common. Men are, we're sick, even when we get sober, we're still like, we
Yeah.
have problems. A lot of men uh, kind of like drift over to like some form of sex addiction a lot of the times after they get sober. And then they use it, and then they like get caught, and then they use it as an excuse, or, it's like the whole Tiger Woods thing or whatever. That is like huge in AA, and
Yeah.
people get canceled. Probably rightfully so. We've been doing that forever. Like, men that are like sleeping with like newcomers, and then they
Yeah.
get kicked out or like not welcomed at the meeting anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, it's that's a major problem.
Yeah.
Women should probably in early sobriety try to attach to other women.
Yeah. I
And
try to
same
like
with men.
swoop them up.
Yeah.
What I noticed happening too is that women were just having to like, it's such a disservice because what ends up happening is women retreat to these private meetings. So we just
Yeah.
started our like little boutique meetings in houses because it was getting so like rough out there. But then with the buses come in with the newcomers and there's no old timers there to be like, hey, protect them a little bit from the kind of like there are predators everywhere,
Yeah.
people are like, people will say this like, 12-step, I'm like, there are predators in churches, there are
Yeah.
predators in gyms, like this is just something you have to deal with, but it is hard when you're like in an extremely vulnerable. We lived across the street in LA from one of the other thing you mentioned that I think is important to discuss, like the absolute racket that is the sober living, which is completely unregulated as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. We lived across the street from one and it was non-stop ambulances and fire
Yeah.
trucks at this place. I think someone died. I'm pretty sure a girl died, OD'd or something.
Oh yeah.
But
People die there.
somebody was ODing like every 2 days at this place.
Yeah. Well, most sober livings are probably bad. The ones that are good, I think, are, incredibly necessary for a lot of people to go to these like functioning, good sober livings. But, a lot of people start sober livings and then they relapse and they own the sober living. And now they're just concerned with making money. And hey, you can give me an extra 200. Oh, you tested dirty? Just give me an extra $200 and I won't kick you out. There's a lot of sober. It really.
They become like drug dens, though.
Well, they're flop houses, and then a lot of them actually started to take insurance, and that's when things got really dirty because now you can charge $3,000 a month because your insurance is paying it, and then if that person tests dirty, you're economically incentivized to not kick them out and just lie about it,
right?
And say, "Oh, I didn't see that dirty test," and then now you have someone using fentanyl in the sober living. People that use drugs like to use drugs with other people, especially when they run out of money and they need money. And then that's when you run into like, okay, now the whole house is on fentanyl.
Yeah.
And I'm just pumping $3,000 off all their insurance.
Jesus.
So I'm not like a communist or a socialist in any way, but like the private sector of rehabilitation does not seem to work that well. I mean, the economic motives and the profit motive to like get people sober, as long as it's not results driven, it like doesn't really work.
But even in this idea of like, let's give them housing. That's the thing they say. Like, they just need houses before. So there's no incentive to get off drugs in order to get housing.
Yeah.
So from the state level, you have all of the not in the private sector. From the state, they're going, well, we'll just give them houses so that they can do their drugs alone in their house, I guess. And then expect them to somehow get sober. But also other people are trying to get sober in these little apartment complexes. And then there are people doing drugs. And it is very hard to get sober when someone's doing drugs around you. Yeah. Even when I first got out of rehab, I lived with a bunch of young people in sobriety and the whole house relapsed. Like everyone. It's actually a miracle I didn't start using heroin again. Everyone in my house started using heroin.
Yeah. It's like, like when there's like gay teenagers and they're like, in like a religious town or something, they're like, oh no, our kid's gay. Like we need to send him off to a camp with a bunch of gay kids and like magically all these gay kids hanging out together unsupervised, like are going to not be gay anymore. It has a bit of that element.
Yeah, definitely.
Where they're like, okay, you guys all love heroin. We're all going to put you into a house together and see what happens. Yeah. The housing first approach has been tried in San Francisco, especially like we're the number one, that's where I'm from. It's not working. The overdose rate in San Francisco has skyrocketed to, I believe, 806 people overdosed in a city of about 800,000 people
Wow.
in 2023. If you look at the majority of those overdoses, they weren't homeless people. They were people that were housed primarily in the neighborhoods with the highest amount of this supportive homeless housing. Just as an example, there was a hotel called Hotel Whitcomb, and when COVID hit, the city forced this hotel to provide rooms to homeless people.
Yeah.
So 400 homeless people entered into Hotel Whitcomb. They were on, most of them are on meth and fentanyl and all that. 400 of them went in there. 18 of them died within a short amount of time. And they caused $25 million worth of damage to one building, and the city had to pay that out to the owners of Hotel Whitcomb. So that's like housing first in a nutshell. That's like the perfect example. I support housing these people. I support housing them in treatment centers,
Right.
or like, big like FEMA camps or something. I mean, like, and some of them have to get mandated to these places. And I'm not saying round up homeless people.
Round up the homeless. Yeah. We're gonna round up the homeless, put them in the FEMA camps.
Yeah. But if like there's a guy that's like has his pants down and he's screaming in a McDonald's and he's like waving around a machete, like that guy needs to get mandated somewhere.
Yeah, but this is everywhere.
Yeah, that guy, there's no like second chances. Like, get that guy somewhere. And maybe he's just mentally ill. Okay, let's put him in a mental hospital. Oh, is he on meth?
Didn't we get rid of mental hospitals?
We did get rid of mental hospitals. So we're going to have to just...
So we need to bring the mental hospitals back.
We need to bring them back.
We need to bring them. They're going to be beautiful.
No, exactly. Like, we need big, beautiful mental hospitals back. Reagan got rid of them. And I get it. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out. Reagan was governor of California. It was a bad look. People got put in mental hospitals that shouldn't have got put in mental hospitals.
Yeah.
It was a humanitarian crisis to some extent, and he got rid of them. But we got to bring them back, and you don't have to stay there forever, maybe, but maybe because a lot of people are like, I've been crazy in a McDonald's dining area, swinging a knife around and getting wild. And you just put me in a room for 3 days and I get off meth. I'm here. This is me. You know? Okay, you get to leave the mental hospital.
Right.
But like, so a lot of people are like that. A lot of these crazy people, you get them off drugs.
Yeah.
They can be productive members of society.
It's called like drug-induced psychosis, lack of sleep, lack of food. You need detox, some meals, and some sleep. And these people are not psychotic anymore.
No,
some
exactly.
of them might be, but
but we have to incentivize them. Like, there's a path of no resistance right now.
Right.
Like, if I was out there, I would just be swinging a machete, smoking meth, and
no one would stop you.
You get the red carpet treatment, basically. And like, so there has to be incentivization for you to not do that. And that means if you're like stealing to support your habit, there's a punishment.
Right.
And we've gotten rid of that, and we've seen the experiment play out. We're watching it in LA. We're watching it in San Francisco. I don't need to explain the results. Everyone knows what the results have been.
Yeah, I was just in LA right before the fire, like 2 days before the fire started, actually. And I was like, maybe it's gotten better than since I left. And nope, it's still like boarded up, even worse. More shops seem to have closed.
Yeah.
There was a guy on the street and just clearly out of his mind. And he was standing there with his arms like just standing there. And then we walked by and these two security guards were walking towards us. He starts screaming at us, following us, yelling at us. They're like, "We're going to escort you." And I was like, what the fuck is going on? I'm with a family member. And they're like, "Oh, don't worry." And they're like, "Go down to the beach. Take it down to the beach." I'm like, so he's just now the women. They're like, this guy's been yelling at women and screaming at women. So I'm like, so now he's like the women at the beaches problem. Like, what is fucking happening here? And then he picks up a bottle. He starts threatening them and he throws it down. And they're like, "Go, move along." And they're like, "Okay, ladies, have a good day." And we just crossed the street. I'm like, what the fuck was that? Like, who are those security guards that appeared out of nowhere? And she was like, "Oh, the city needs to hire private security to guard the 3rd Street Promenade from all these crazy people." But I'm like, doesn't the city have police? Like, what is happening? Am I wrong to be like...
Well, the police can't do anything. Well, LA has a new DA.
No one can do anything.
Yeah, but they would literally, it's like a cop isn't going to be like, I'm going to risk my life like arresting this guy just so he can get a ticket.
But private security, I can't arrest them. They just move them along. Like,
yeah, they just move them along. And listen, there's been so many times when like I'd black out on like heroin and meth and like be getting wild in like a Starbucks or something like that. And next thing you know, I'm just on Skid Row. I like respawn on Skid Row. And I'm like, oh, so they like would take me to Skid Row. You know, so like that's happened a lot of times.
On Skid Row.
Yeah, like because
they're like boing.
Because
like,
it is like
shit.
It's like an open map on a video game, and sometimes when you're on meth, you're like, I'm gonna go to this corner of the map and cause trouble, and then you just respawn. You know, it's like a free ride basically.
That is fucking nuts. I mean, what if you were in charge of all of this?
Yeah,
this sim in particular, sim, homeless, fentanyl, crack. It's the worst sim to be in charge of, but you're in charge of it. What do you do?
Oh man, I'd go scorched earth and I'd end every contract with every nonprofit. And I'll just use San Francisco as an example. I'd end every contract with every nonprofit. If I was like governor, I'd reverse SB 1380, which ties sobriety requirements to housing in order to receive state funding. I'd work, well, see, there's so many problems. Like we have bad judges. So like, even if you get a good DA, you need the judges to actually like convict them. But anyway, I would, you know, I would reach out to the federal government and be like, hey, we're going to take, you know, Treasure Island or like, one of these islands. We're going to build like a temporary,
we're going to build a FEMA camp.
We're going to build a camp. And when homeless people are like doing something, now listen, if you're just homeless,
we're gonna reopen. What's that place off the fucking
Alcatraz?
Yeah, we're gonna reopen.
That would be a great location. It's like the structure's already there. We wouldn't have to build anything. And it's like we're not going to round people up, but like if you're caught stealing to support your habit, you're going to Alcatraz. If you're like living in your car and you're homeless, you're going to Alcatraz. But we're gonna help you. Like it's not Alcatraz is not a good example.
This is so weird though, because I had a dream that this actually happened. Like I had a dream that they were putting people on Alcatraz again.
Well,
and
they
were like
they
homeless,
might start doing
mentally
it.
ill
But
people.
Alcatraz is not a good example. But basically, like reach out, like have a place, and it's like, okay, come here. Why are you homeless? There's 3 groups. Economic reasons. Okay, we're gonna just help you.
Right.
Okay. Oh, you're a single mom living in a car. We're getting you housing. There is, you know, we've built temporary housing. That housing should be specifically reserved for people that are not on drugs and not mentally ill. And maybe they're single moms, or maybe they lost their job, or maybe they broke their leg.
What percentage of homelessness is
very
that?
small?
Yeah.
Very small.
This is like the kind of mythical homeless person, you know, it exists, but it's like, it's not, I don't think it's as large as people in government and power like you to think that it is.
No, it's not. And also those people, first of all, they're the easiest to help because they literally just need a leg up. Second of all, they usually have family that haven't abandoned them, or they have friends. They have an opportunity. They can sleep on a couch. They can call their aunt in Indiana, maybe get a bus ticket. Yeah, they can. But like me, like I didn't have that couch. I had those couches. I burned every bridge because I'm a meth head.
Yeah.
So like, you know, so I went through that phase. So those people are easy to help. And then anyone like committing a crime to support their drug habit, or anyone acting out in an anti-social manner, which affects the civil liberties of others, meaning you're swinging a machete around at a McDonald's. You're going to Alcatraz, not as prison, but we're just going to evaluate you. Okay, what's going on? Do you have a history of mental illness? Do you have a history of drug addiction? Is it purely just drug addiction, or is it drug addiction and mental illness? That will matter for where we put you next. And what we will have next is we will have long-term treatment centers and reopen mental hospitals. And you go to one of those 2. The long-term treatment centers, we're going to, you know, hopefully 6 to 12 months. We're going to work with economic experts that know the direction of labor needs in this country. We're going to start training people to become self-sufficient. We're going to link with the federal government for the infrastructure bill that Biden passed. Who knows where that money's going, but let's say it's going to fix bridges. Okay, we need X amount of welders. We need X amount of linemen to keep up the electrical grid. We'll create, you know, it's almost like an FDR style, like we're going to rebuild America and we're going to get these people.
And we're going to use the junkies.
We're going to use the junkies because the greatest tool to get off heroin or get off drugs and remain off drugs is to establish a sense of self-esteem and a sense of purpose. And if you don't have strong underlying mental illness, you can recover.
Yeah.
Well, you can recover if you have mental illness as well, but you can recover and like become self-sufficient. And we're
Yeah.
going to help you. We're going to hold your hand over 1 to 2 years and guide you to self-sufficiency and no more swinging a machete around. And that seems
obvious.
It seems obvious. It seems expensive. But then again, California spent $24 billion in the past 5 years to address homelessness, and it has gotten worse.
And I don't know that there's been any real accounting of where that money went. So they tried to like audit this.
They did, yeah.
And then Newsom shot it down or something. There's no.
Well, they looked into it. So of the 24 million, 16 million went to 5 entities.
Million or billion?
Oh, sorry, 16 billion.
Okay.
Went to 5 entities, 2 of which were found to have been cost effective. So that's not a good start. Where's a lot of this money going? It's getting pocketed. It's getting laundered. It's getting stolen. If I want to start a nonprofit
California.
in San Francisco, I could start a treatment center. That would require a lot of work. Or I could get like a red flyer, like red wagon thing and pass out crack pipes and get a $5 million contract to do that. I'm going to, if you're like a slimy person, you're going to go for the latter. It requires no work and you can just steal millions of dollars. And all you need is a wagon and some crack pipes.
And that's called what?
Harm reduction.
Harm reduction.
Yeah.
So what can you explain to people who may, like you and I know what this is, but can you explain it to people why they think handing out crack pipes is helpful?
Well, it all starts from handing out needles. They didn't hand out needles. They exchanged needles to prevent the spread of HIV. And I utilize needle exchanges, and I probably don't have HIV because of it. So I'm not against harm reduction.
Right.
But it got radicalized.
Yeah.
And it used to be run by ex-junkies. Now it's run by like people that majored in sociology from UC Santa Cruz and maybe dyed their hair blue and they, don't really know what's going on. And
they don't get it.
Yeah. So these people need to justify their funding. And with the onset of fentanyl, a lot less people are shooting drugs now. You smoke fentanyl on tinfoil. So they had to switch gears. The HIV angle doesn't work anymore because you can't pass HIV with tinfoil and crack pipes. So they argued that you could pass HIV with a crack pipe if you cut your lip on the crack pipe and then shared it with someone. So that was the justification for handing out crack pipes. The justification for handing out tinfoil, I know people that get paid $30 an hour to go walk around homeless encampments and hand out tinfoil.
Wow.
And I used to go in the garbage can and find a half-eaten burrito and rip the tinfoil off and smoke burrito and heroin together. I mean, that's what I had to do. These guys are getting Uber Eats delivery tinfoil.
You're like, it's bullshit. The kids these days don't know what it's like to dumpster dive and have to find a burrito and take the like, that's how I feel about weed. I'm like, you kids don't know what it's like to have to go sit with some shitty dealer who wants to talk to you about surfing while he tries to make out with you.
Yeah, you used to have to risk rape to buy a dub sack of weed.
Yeah.
Now you just
regularly.
Regularly.
Or like give an HJ,
You used to have to. I didn't have to do that, but I know women that had to do that or did that.
Yeah, just easier.
Yeah,
it's easier than getting raped.
Exactly. You know how many times I've been robbed trying to buy a dime of weed.
Oh, I'm sure.
So yeah, it was a lot harder, but yeah. So now people start nonprofits. They get the $2 million contract. They hire some idiot and give him $30 an hour to hand out tinfoil.
That's fucking nuts. So what's the justification for tinfoil?
There is no justification. It's harm reduction. It's like helping homeless people. But that's not helping homeless people.
Why do you think, how do you think progressivism, how much time have we been going?
A little under an hour.
Under an hour? Okay. I blocked my clock because I'm an idiot.
It's okay.
How do you think progressivism got thank you. How do you think progressivism got so distorted that it seems almost like this idea that it's a humanitarian cause, but it seems very dehumanizing?
Well, it needs to, it's almost like capitalism. It needs to grow. It needs to keep growing. And like once you solve one problem, well, then we need to make money in another way. And it's like, it keeps going and going. And it's gotten to the point where like, it's like a vacuum that needs to suck up government funding. And so it will move to every corner and it reached the corner finally of like homeless meth head drug addicts that are humans that deserve help. But this is not helping, and helping them does not equal more funding. but maintaining them and doing like urban farming of the homeless, that does justify more funding. So it's sort of like, it's just this thing that needs to keep growing.
Is this like big NGO?
Yeah.
Have you read State of Fear by Michael Crichton?
No, I haven't.
It's all about this. It's more about eco-terrorism, but basically this idea that, you know, in order to justify like your war against the climate, you need to have these very extreme climate things like that are happening now. This is one of the other conspiracies going around.
Yeah. Well, he was an absolute genius, and he predicted almost everything that we're going through right now. He predicted it in the 90s.
Yeah, he got canceled for this book.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. He's been canceled a few times.
So that's kind of what I think a lot about that book, even and now, like you're saying, it moved to this corner where now we have to like maintain this population of human zombies in order to maintain and justify the presence of all of these ridiculous organizations and even state-run funding, and that all the money that's coming for these bills, you know, people are like, oh, this was something that always drove me so crazy. The arguing over whether to call somebody, you know, a person experiencing houselessness or the unhoused or whatever. I'm like, you're not fucking helping them with this language.
Yeah. I mean, if you've been homeless, you use the term homeless. If you use the term unhoused, I know that you slept on a couch for 2 weeks and you weren't actually homeless. But yeah, they play these games. I mean, this is what they do, you know? And the bottom line is that they're not trying to fix anything. It's a jobs program.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And is it malicious? Is there like powerful entities at the top that are trying to like disorganize society? Is it weaponized? Are people weaponizing homelessness to like, you know, create instability? I don't know. That's above my pay grade, you know?
So what happens to this whole group of people in your, you know, Alcatraz vision of the future? What happens to them? Do they become homeless?
No, they live there. You know, I've been to programs, like I went to a program called the Midnight Mission that was like a 12 to 24 month program. I would just model after that, where it's like, we hold your hand. There's graduated levels of reintroducing you into independence.
That's like where I lived, the halfway house.
Yeah, like eventually you make your way into like the dorm area as opposed to like the just sleeping on a mattress. And then you get then the third floor was like apartments. And it's like, okay, now you're in the apartments and you get more freedom.
Yeah.
You get to go to work and all that. And we just reintroduce you into society. And maybe we give you a stipend for housing on the contingency that you remain sober and employed for 6 months or something, just to get you back on your feet. But like this whole just like, here's a studio apartment, call us when you OD on fentanyl it's not a lasting strategy.
So what was the one that you were talking about, the SB, the one that connects housing to
SB 1380?
Okay, SB 1380. What is that exactly?
That was the thing that Gavin Newsom was behind, and he is quoted as saying, clean and sober is the worst damn thing this country ever did. I don't know why he said that. This country...
He was probably drunk.
Well, he does have a history, and I grew up with him. He was the mayor of San Francisco. People don't know this. He had a pretty bad sex scandal where he slept with his campaign manager's wife and went to rehab.
Yep.
And he has it out for rehab. He hates rehab. He hates recovery. He does this SB 1380 thing in like 2014, 2015 when he's lieutenant governor. And it basically says any program that is getting any amount of state funding that's providing housing to homeless people on the contingency that they remain sober will no longer receive that state funding. So if they want to continue to receive that state funding, they have to cut the sobriety requirements.
Wow.
And it turned places like the Midnight Mission that I went to into like glorified, drug maintenance housing centers.
Wow.
And
what a disaster.
Yeah, I don't know why he did that.
I think he might be diabolical. I know people are like, don't be hard on him, but I really, or maybe the LA City Council. I'm not sure. He strikes me as someone who may be diabolical. Like he's
certainly diabolical. Yeah. I feel bad for him. I know that he's wanted to become president, and his chances have really dwindled in the last...
Why do you feel bad for him though?
Well, because he's he's like too good looking and too presidential looking to like not go for it, I guess. I don't, I
No,
get,
this guy is like a puppet of he's completely failed up, It's
oh,
like every
completely.
single place that this guy has gone has been destroyed,
Yeah.
starting with your city. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
and then moved on to the great state of California, which is in shambles and has lost more people ever in its history.
Yeah.
California experienced nothing but growth until he basically
That's
became
true.
governor.
Yeah.
And so this guy who is just completely failed up somehow in politics, and he's constantly propped up because he has Getty money behind him.
Yeah. And Pelosi money.
And Pelosi money and
Yeah.
a lot of influence. And then you've got people running cover for him constantly. But like the stuff he pulled over COVID lockdowns, dining at the French Laundry while everyone
Yeah.
else was locked up, while people were ODing, while you couldn't go to a fucking AA meeting.
Yeah.
Like that is diabolical. And I don't use this word lightly, but evil. Like
Yeah.
your kids are going to a private school, and the kids who are the most that you allegedly care the most about, the kids that don't have access to iPads, don't have backyards, don't have Wi-Fi in some instances, are in abusive households. They're locked in and don't have school. You shut down the outdoor playground. Like I'm sorry. I don't feel bad for that guy.
No, you're right.
He's made
You're
a
right.
lot of fucking mistakes, and he
Yeah.
should pay. And he's never been held accountable for any of them.
Yeah. Well,
It makes me mad. Like, what happened to those kids? 4 million kids didn't log in during COVID.
Yeah.
And they're high-risk kids. These are at-risk youth. And they ended up in gang. Who knows where they ended up? Not to mention, when you look at how just having no literacy, if you can't read, you're more like your lifespan is cut by decades. Just losing the ability to read, it costs lives.
Yeah, certainly. I'll never forgive him for the COVID policies that he enacted, and I can't tell you how many of my friends died during COVID.
Me too.
Not from COVID, but from like, he outlawed. He was, police were coming to the park to break up
AA
AA meetings.
People were.
Yeah.
We lost so many people. It was actually, I can't even talk. It makes me emotional thinking about how many people I heard, like, it'd be like, where'd she go? And it's like, OD. When I can't even, like, and the bars were open and you couldn't go to church or you couldn't do this stuff is psychotic. It is not, you took away people's life raft and then expected them, and yet you could still like go to a restaurant because they were your buddies and I don't know. I have very little, any kind of real, none of these people have been held accountable for any of this.
Yeah.
And it was horrific for people in recovery in particular.
Yeah. Well, he finally might be getting held accountable.
I don't know.
I don't know, but this is the biggest chance that, I see a lot of people coming out. I see celebrities coming out and like, calling for him to be held accountable for the mismanagement of these fires. And, I think his chances of becoming president have become near impossible. And it's his own doing. And I think people in swing states in 2028, when they think about California, they're going to think about a homeless guy with his pants down, swinging around a machete. And 40 years ago in a swing state, if you were to think about California, you thought about the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
And that's because of Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
And they're going to decide the election, just like they decide every election. And they're not going to be sold Gavin Newsom. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So we're watching a man's dream disintegrate live on television right now.
Even the recent, as we're recording, it's coming out that LA City Council is now trying to already rezone Altadena so that they can build. I'm like, oh, good thing you didn't prove all the conspiracy theorists right, that this was just a land grab to make these 15-minute cities in advance of 2028 Olympics. Like, they are already rezoning, and people, the houses are still smoldering. This is it's, I don't know. I don't understand. This is like, you also took all of these single homes that all these people were house rich. And so you're just taking in many instances, black wealth
Yeah.
away, and you're calling it progressive. Like, it's
Yeah.
fucking psycho. People need to like call this shit out. I hope people start. I'm not optimistic. You shouldn't have had to have your entire life burned to the ground in order to see what a mismanaged clusterfuck LA and to the greater extent California has become. San Francisco, that used to be a beautiful city.
Yeah, I think it's one of the greatest cities in the world.
Yeah.
It is.
It was a shining
doing
jewel.
well. I mean, it's
And-
doing a lot better than it was 2 years ago, but yeah, it has a lot of problems.
Yeah. I don't think like anyone looking at California and going, how do we make more of America like this?
Yeah, it ain't gonna happen.
You know, like
It's not gonna happen. I'm sorry, Gavin Newsom.
I am not.
I don't think it's gonna happen.
I will.
Yeah, I'm not sorry actually,
you-
but I'm just letting you know. I think that dream is, for lack of a better term, burning up right now.
What do you think they need to do more of in California? Like the things that really worked for you when you were getting sober, aside from, you know, the kind of long-term rehab treatment center that you went to.
Yeah.
What other policies or things that you think are really destructive to the people who are living on the streets?
Well, I think, you know, when I got sober in 2018, the things were a little bit better economically. I think the fact that like the middle class has essentially been destroyed, and like, you know, Gavin's like adding another tax to gas. You know, gas is going to go up to another 60 cents or something like that. Deregulate a little bit, lower taxes. That's a big ask, but like make life. I bought a car for $1,200 when I got sober, and gas was $320.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that car right now would be $5,000. You know, life is just a lot more difficult, and it's a lot harder to get on your feet. In the name of progressivism, all these policies has just like destroyed any chance of class mobility or getting rising up, you know? So I'm a middle class maximalist. I think every policy should be geared towards growing the middle class, because the middle class exponentially grows upon itself. The more people that have disposable income will then feed it back into the economy and create more jobs. And every progressive, or even I could say liberal policy, destroys that.
Yeah.
So,
well, communism does hate the middle class.
Well, the middle class is very dangerous.
Yeah, they're too free
to points of power. So, so that's one aspect. Another aspect I would say is reinforce the law. That'd be good. I think I don't think it's fair. Like in places like Oakland, people that lived in the hood and didn't have that many options and all that. You know, it was always not great in some of these poorer places. And then the fact that they've just decriminalized crime. Now you have like 14 and 15-year-olds shooting people and like robbing people at gunpoint and getting no repercussions for it.
Right.
You know, getting put on like a program where you have to like go after school to learn about how you shouldn't shoot people. And there's no punishment for not going to that class. I mean, there's people that have murdered people in Oakland and they aren't going to prison. That's not fair to these people. You know, that actually only encourages people to continue to commit crimes that otherwise may have stayed in school and maybe gotten a really good scholarship to go to Cal Berkeley or something and had a career. So just the complete flipping of incentivization in the state would help everybody, but it would greatly help people trying to get off drugs and getting off the streets.
But doesn't it feel, because one of the reasons that I left was the disdain that I felt as a just law-abiding taxpayer from the state and the city council and the governor. I've never seen anything like it. Why do they hate normal people just living their lives? And it's really wild to me.
Yeah, no, you are the enemy of the state. If you are paying your taxes and you're following the law, you are the enemy, and you will be punished to the greatest extent of the law. Whereas if you are just like a criminal, nothing happens. And I know that people say that's an exaggeration, but like, listen, in Oakland, you don't have to have a license plate. You don't have to register your car, you know? But if you do register your car and you follow the rules, you'll get a parking ticket.
Right.
You know, or you could just not follow any laws and get no punishment at all. And, you know, you go rob houses and drive away and and have your license plate blacked out or whatever, or no license plate, no punishment.
What?
But if someone attacks you and you fight back, you're going to prison.
Why?
Extreme incompetence, extreme ineptitude. I don't really buy like the conspiracy angle where it's like this is a controlled demolition of a functioning society. There's just no purpose. I just think 2020 we lost our minds in response to certain events, and we went mad for 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's just the extreme like kowtowing to like the extreme minority with the loudest voices, and this whole performative. It's just everything's performative. Everyone's running at the like the seat of their pants just to get to the next stop on like the political elevator to the next place in government, and no one has foresight, and we are governed by absolute loser failures.
Yeah. Well, there's getting sober and then staying sober. So how do you kind of tell, or what advice or wisdom would you give for people who are trying to, because I do think that first year you're just like getting sober.
Yeah.
Physically putting your life back together. I found 1 to 2 years was really challenging, because I think that's when it hits you like, oh, living sober is like it's almost like a separate part completely from getting sober.
Yeah.
What wisdom do you have?
Yeah. That first year is like summer camp where you're like, you just like join a crew of people. You don't even like know half their names. And like, this is your friend group now. And you guys go to diners, you guys go to AA meetings, you guys go bowling. You're like, you become a zombie in a good way. You just kind of follow the pack.
Yeah.
And that's almost the easy part. And then, as you like gain independence, it gets tough, and you got to stay close to that pack. And as you get more time, you become a leader in that pack, and you have to never get away from where you came from. And you have to never get away from the fundamental concept of like, I need to continue to help people. I need to become selfless. When I become self-obsessed and start thinking about myself too much and start thinking, I got this is like, that's like the death call.
Oh, I know. I always say that. I got this is my red flag.
Yeah.
I have to like reverse it into I got this, I'm like, I need to just like do something else. The minute I'm like, I got this, I'm like, I'm fucked right now, actually.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Every time I've said that, I've ended up like with a crack pipe in my mouth.
Yeah.
So stay close to the source. And now you have to it's a responsibility. I mean, you have maintained sobriety, and now it's time for you to start helping people that have less time than you, just like the way that you were helped when you had less time. And never forget where you came from, and never put, this is it. Never put anything in front of sobriety. Since I got sober, I haven't put anything in front of sobriety, and I have done amazing things, and life has, bloomed into this amazing thing that I never thought it would happen.
Yep.
And I didn't try to do any of it.
Yeah.
I just focused on keep sobriety above everything else.
Yeah.
And I've had many careers, and reconnected with family, and had all these miracles, and got all these amazing podcasts and shows, and I didn't focus on those things. It's a patience, just.
It is a miracle.
Yeah.
Anyone out there listening who's doing it, and the other thing is, I had my first sponsor, she always used to say it gets better.
Yeah.
And she was such like a radiant light that but it's someone who I could so identify with. I think finding people who have a little bit more time than you, maybe have experienced something, and give you that hope of like, well, if they can do it, surely I can do it. Or somebody has gone before me at least and done this.
Yeah.
And it gave me so much hope, and I just believed her for some I didn't have any reason to. I just did.
Yeah.
And my husband and I joke about this all the time. We went to the same meeting together, actually, and this guy was like, when I got sober, he was like, I'm sober, and everything in my life should be stamped with property of AA. And I was like, like eye roll, fucking kill me. And now I look at my life and I'm like, that motherfucker. I mean, my husband and I met in recovery. I have a child. It's like, it is very easy to forget. I want to thank you actually for your book. Even writing it must have been challenging because it's so personal, and you've been through a lot. And I didn't really want to spoil Like, I want people to buy your book and read it because I think they deserve to read your book and your story. It's just amazing, and you are
Thank
a
you.
miracle. But I want to thank you for writing it, because for someone like me who has 11 years, which is time does not really matter, but it is easy to forget. It is easy for me to forget that, you know, me going back out is always it would look like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard to, people need to remember where they came from.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people with 20 years go right back to day
Oh,
one, and it's
those are the
terrible.
worst stories.
Yeah. But listen, I thank you. The book is hopefully enjoyable. Most people have said they've enjoyed it.
It is. It's
yeah.
hard to read. I mean, as someone who's been through some of that and nowhere near like, Skid Row for a decade, the stuff you see even there in one day walking around. So living in that it's like, yeah, I really commend you. Most people don't survive what you survived, and I'm grateful that you did, because I think you actually can help a lot of people and help our government and our society kind of understand how these policies because the average person, here's what I've realized from doing stand-up and telling jokes about drugs, and I'm like, the average person isn't a fucking junkie.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't know. So they think they're being helpful because these people with degrees tell them this is the right thing to do and this is what's helpful, and it's the complete opposite of helpful.
Yeah.
And junkies know what lying pieces of shit we are, and how we will manipulate anything. And like you say in your book, you give a junkie an inch and they will take a fucking mile.
Yeah.
And it's like, none of these, I needed that structure and that rehab of it being like boot camp, of there being very clear boundaries, of there being a requirement for sobriety. I would have just run wild if I had any kind of. They took my phone privileges away because I lied, went and saw my ex-boyfriend, had sex with him in his rehab. They busted me. And then I wasn't allowed to see men. I was on male restriction.
Yeah, that's probably good. You need consequences for your
actions.
bad behavior.
Yeah,
and
for
then
a
you
while.
adjust your
I could
behavior.
only call my dad.
Well, that's yeah. But yeah, ex-junkies have to be part of the conversation addressing these issues. Obviously, I wrote a book. I want to sell the book. I want people to read it. But what I really want is for noise to happen about the book so that people like Gavin Newsom start hearing about this, and people in the federal government start hearing about this. And it's not about making money. It's about, this is an opportunity for society to change. And I just want to make noise about what is going on and the mismanagement of this. And I think that the next chapter in the government addressing these problems is going to have voices like mine and voices like yours involved directly.
Yeah. Do you know Thomas Wolfe? Is that
Yes.
I love him.
Yeah, me and him are like same deal.
Yep. Same deal.
We're on the same page. We did the same thing.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
We could talk for hours and hours and hours.
Yep.
Because we lived the same life.
Yep.
And he's a hero. And Schellenberger's done a lot of work.
I met him with
realm.
Schellenberger that day.
Yeah. So I kind of met them all through that. Since I met Schellenberger, he has elevated to tackling much, I guess some would consider much larger issues, even though I don't want to say one issue is more important than the other, but he is, he's trying to save the country and all that. So he's on a whole different level. But he laid a lot of very important groundwork for this.
What's your biggest defect of character?
Oh my God. I still care about what people think about me. I still get really paranoid, and I can play the tape to a delusional extent about the future. And, I said something and my voice kind of went high at the end, and now this person hates me for the rest of my life. And I still do things like that. That's probably one of my greatest defects that I have not been able to shake entirely. But what's cool is through recovery, you just catch it and you're like, oh yeah, you're nuts. You're just doing
I'm
that
just crazy
nutty thing that you do all the time. And then you get to laugh about it. And, but that got me for a long time.
What's your biggest asset?
My biggest asset is by far, my biggest asset is the fact that I had some would say that I started with a handicap in life. by having junkie parents.
Some might say that.
Yeah, my greatest asset is the incredibly horrific trauma that I went through in my 20s, being on and off homeless with the drugs. That's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. It's the source of it's the greatest source of strength that I have. If none of that would have happened, I would be selling insurance somewhere and have a boring life in a cubicle. And
not that there's anything
there's
wrong
nothing
with
wrong
that.
with that. And in fact, I've wished for it many times. But I feel it's just my greatest asset. It's given me a sense of purpose and direction. And so you gotta utilize your you gotta utilize your deficits, and you can convert them into assets.
Mhm.
Not everything. I'm not saying like go experience extreme trauma on purpose or anything, but that's how I live, and that's my greatest asset.
Well, where can people find you and your book?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Jared Klickstein. You can find me on Instagram at J Klickst, but just Google Jared Klickstein. The book is available on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. If you can't afford the book, DM me and I'll send you a PDF of it. I don't care. I don't have any copies. I can't mail you a copy. I can't mail you a physical copy, but I'll send you a PDF. But preferably buy it if you can afford it. And just mostly X. Find me on X at Jared Klickstein.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor, and I had a great time.
Thank you.
The check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie can now be found at Phetasy.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.